You are listening to Talking Africa, the podcast that gets behind the news from the continent, brought to you by the Africa Report magazine. My name is Patrick Smith. So welcome to the pod, and head straight to the africareport.com to read all our latest reporting on the pandemic and a host of other political, business and cultural issues. This week we have Dr Alex Magaisa on the pod. Alex is one of the most prolific and respected analysts of the politics and economics of Zimbabwe. He publishes the Big Saturday Read, which has a keen audience within Africa and around the world. The growing mood of political confrontation in Zimbabwe and the economic meltdown is raising concerns about the risks of this current crisis spinning out of control. Blighted by a drought and a lack of farming inputs, more than half the country's 16 million people are food insecure. The latest version of the Zimbabwe dollar is rapidly losing its value against the US dollar, and the official inflation rate is running at over 780%. Added to which, the country is threatened by the spread of the coronavirus, some of it coming up from its southern neighbour, South Africa, which has the highest number of coronavirus cases on the continent. But the first issue I wanted Alex to explain to the Talking Africa audience was why the Minister of Home Affairs, Kazembe, chose to organise a news conference to dismiss rumours that disgruntled elements in the military had been plotting a coup d'etat against President Emmerson Mnangagwa's government.
Thank you, Patrick. I should say the press conference was actually a press conference of a committee of the National Security Council, which is the constitutional organ which is charged with handling, as the name says, security matters. And the person who delivered the statement was the Minister of Home Affairs, so the civilian face of the National Security Council. But the commander of the Defense Forces and other generals were also present at that press conference. So it was quite a high-level press conference, one that was bizarre in its content, substance, as well as the tone with which it was presented. Here was the chief security organ of the country coming in to deny a rumor about a coup. Now, this hasn't happened before. I don't recall, and there have been many rumors in the past that a coup has happened or a coup had been attempted, and the government has never come out to deny, to make a denial such as we saw this week. So it was certainly bizarre from that point of view, and it raised many questions. And one of the reasons why it was even odd was that, as far as many people were concerned, I follow Zimbabwean politics quite a lot, as do many other people that I know. But most of those people, I would say 9 out of 10 of them, had never heard of that rumor. And even if they had heard of that rumor, it could not be described as a widespread rumor. So it was very surprising to see the National Security Council coming through to, have this press conference denying the existence of a rumor. And therefore, it raised a lot of questions as to why this was happening. And there are many theories that you could suggest, and I suppose we could discuss that, as to why they did this. Why did they have to have that conference?
Alex, perhaps we should also just state what the argument of the Security Minister and the Home Affairs Minister was. I believe they said that the rumour claimed there were dissidents within the military and security services trying to destabilize the government, and they said that was absolutely false. But what I thought was quite interesting were the people they blamed for propagating these rumors. They mentioned the G40 group, which was this dissident group within the ruling party, ZANU-PF, which was seen as loyal to the former First Lady, Grace Mugabe. They blamed foreign embassies, which is pretty much par for the course in Zimbabwe. They blamed the MDC alliance. That's the kind of the major part of the opposition movement for democratic change party, and various civic activists and so on. Does that cover the ground? I mean, do you think it was an excuse just to come out and say, look, the reason why there's trouble in this country is not the government, but it's all these covert opposition groups trying to unseat the government, so you've got to back us. I mean, was it a cry for national support?
That's certainly one way of looking at it. The regime under Mnangagwa and under Mugabe has always used scapegoating, finding a scapegoat for the country's troubles. And the regime is under a lot of pressure at the moment. The economy is not performing. There's a lot of frustration and disgruntlement. You covered that so well in your introduction. The COVID pandemic has made things worse. But this is a regime, ZANU-PF has never accepted responsibility. It has to find someone else to blame. So that's one way of looking at it. But in my opinion, it is also possible, and certainly there are now rumors because people have begun to ask questions after the press conference. It prompted us to ask questions as to what's going on. And there is certainly some information coming through which seems to suggest that there were some disgruntled people within the establishment, both the civilian and perhaps the military, and therefore this statement was a warning to them. It was a communication to them. So the view is that the audience was not us, the public. It was not the international community. It was not anybody else, but it was people within the ZANU-PF establishment that they were communicating to, that we know what you are up to, and it's not going to happen, or rather, we are going to stop it. That's one way. But there's also another possibility, which is more sinister, Patrick, which is that whenever the ZANU-PF regime wants to clamp down on the opposition, it finds reason to justify it. And we know this from experience during Gukurahundi, which were the atrocities committed against the people of Matabeleland in the 1980s, when at least 20,000 people were killed by the Mugabe regime. Mr. Mnangagwa, who is now president, was the state security minister. And the common tactic was always to create a scenario which suggests that the government is under threat, and therefore to then deploy the apparatus of force, the apparatus of coercion to try and clamp down on the opposition. So this could be another sinister reason, and certainly we have seen a lot of repression against opposition figures, including abductions and torture of opposition politicians in recent months.
Right. Now, the generals from the military at this news conference, didn't actually say anything. They just sort of stood there looking martial-like, did they?
Yes. No, they didn't say anything. They were just, but their presence, you could say, spoke a lot. It spoke volumes. It's difficult to interpret what exactly it meant, but presumably, as this was the National Security Council, right, they were all taking responsibility for the statement as coming from them. Yes.
Because it was a turning point in the 2017 coup against the late Robert Mugabe, when the military had that press conference in Harare, and you saw all the service chiefs and the top brass of the military gathered around, and at that stage, I think Chiwenga and who's now the vice president, Constantino Chiwenga, and Sibusiso Moyo, who's now foreign minister, made statements, and I think that seemed to be a turning point. But this time, the military just stayed quiet. They were not. And I'm wondering, to what extent do you think the military could take the initiative if the political situation continues to deteriorate? Then, as they did in 2017, and if they did, who would benefit? Would it be again in support of a civilian candidate like Mnangagwa was in 2017, or would they say, well, actually, there isn't a civilian in the upper echelons of ZANU-PF who can take on the leadership of the country, and one of us has got to do it? What do you think the possibility of that?
Yes. So, Patrick, if we go back to November 2017, those of us who were skeptical of what was going on, one of the things we said was that, to quote the old adage, a coup begets a coup. And we warned that having taken power using the gun, there was also a risk that now created a moral hazard. The military now understood that it was possible for them to take power. Now, that coup was described as not a coup. You remember the bizarre terminology that was used at the time. And
right.
It's interesting to draw some parallels. Perhaps it is too tempting to do so, and say that even in this case, they have come out to deny rumors of the coup. Now, some Zimbabweans have been joking about this, half joking, it has to be said, because it's a serious matter, that whenever the government or the regime denies something, usually it is true.
Right.
There is something going on. So what are the possibilities of the military doing this? I would say that the possibilities are very high. It may not be the military elites who do it. It could be the subordinates, the juniors, the middle ranking or the junior, military. These are people who are hungry. These are people who have not benefited from their sacrifices of the coup in 2017. But their leaders have certainly benefited. I wouldn't be surprised if that disgruntlement would be expressed in some form of action. And perhaps this is the reason why we are seeing the panic and the bizarre statement that we heard on Wednesday. So what are the possibilities? As I say, the possibilities remain high. We have already set a precedent. It was a dangerous precedent. Who would they put in? They know it's very difficult to put a military figure in charge in light of the approach that is taken by the SADC region and indeed the African Union, the no condemnation of coups. The way they would have to do it is to dress it up like they did in 2017 when both of those organizations seemed to they did accept what had happened, even though we all knew that it was a coup, but they pretended that it wasn't a coup. So if they were to do it, they would do it. But this time I think they've got a few more people who are no longer in uniform, people who are now civilians in government and maybe outside. So they have faces that can be used as civilian faces. Whichever way they use, Patrick, it would not be a blatant old-style coup storming the palace. No, I think if anything is going to happen, if they're going to do anything, they will do it they'll try to be as smart, I would say, if we're to give them that credit as they did in 2017, so that it doesn't appear like an obvious or a blatant coup.
But there do seem to be credible reports of divisions within the